How much I wish all musicians were treated equally in history. Is it fair or unfair? But I like to think that the works matter more than the importance that we give in music history to the composers. It's so easy to say, of course, Beethoven is the greatest. And when you play music of another composer, it has to be always, oh, but it reminds me of this, or it reminds me of that. And when you're a super famous composer, then everybody just thinks that you are the alpha and omega. Of course, not. But then what happens is that you have these composers who have been played less or more recently and who are not being always treated by history as they should, because hierarchies were imposed by publisher, teachers, or performers. And then I find that it's very important to open the horizons of the students to discover music of different time periods, not only, but within the time periods. To find the composers who, perhaps like Johann Christian Bach, was not the most famous Bach son of the composers, or find somebody like Gabriel Dupont, who was perhaps not the most famous of the French Impressionist composers, as they call them, even if it's a wrong denomination, but that's another story. And that Metnar is not perhaps the greatest of the Russian composers of the late Romantics, early 20th century, but he was. And so you can go on, and you can always find people telling you, "Oh, I don't like Scriabin's late period," or Fauré. For me, it's good, but not in this or that piece. So we can be picking and choosing for some, and it's fashionable. And if you say, "Oh, I don't like Beethoven or Schubert," they'll look at you like an idiot, and possibly one is. But is it acquired taste, or is it because of the way we're taught to hierarchize the importance of the composers? I think this hierarchy of composers is the main problem. Who defines, who decides, and why? Albanese is as meaningful, as subtle, as deep, as complex as Schubert is. And Schubert without a teacher, Albanese, not that had much more compared to the knowledge of a Bach and the fugues. And all composers, Schubert, Beethoven, Barber, and many tried to write fugues after Bach, but it's no more the same. It's very interesting how then I want to break this mold of the hierarchy for the students to appreciate the works for what they are and not in the chronology or the way of importance that they're divided by in history books. And so is Schubert a romantic? Is Beethoven a classic who started Romanticism? And is Bach really Baroque? None of them were any of what we call them themselves, obviously. In fact, they were audacious and modern, daring and possibly for their own time dissonant and breaking the established rules of the form to express themselves through phrases that are not organized by a group of bars. So the form was like a mold that was broken by the Romantic era 19th century composers like Schumann, Liszt, Chopin, Brahms, and Mendelssohn, and they all brought music to another dimension of expression in terms of the length of the phrase, like a run-on sentence. Fascinating. Fascinating how much they knew or misunderstood their own past. How do we know how much Chopin knew of Frescobaldi or Monteverdi or of any of the ancient masters? They had so little access in comparison to us today. And so finally I can say that encouraging a student to play a repertoire that is not considered main is very important too. Because in a way it becomes meaningful to them to defend it. They feel like they're part of the conviction army We are here because we are convinced. We want to make you like it. We want to make you want to hear more of it. And when they play the pieces that everybody plays and that are very important to know, the core repertoire, they're mostly afraid they won't do it right and they'll be judged. And that's how exams and juries and auditions frighten them. But if you play something of a lesser known composer, even if it's a famous style like, I don't know, Galant, Baroque, or late Baroque, or whichever, you feel like so free to really do what you are supposed to do as a craftsman artist, is to bring to life the notes of the score, is to understand intelligently the notation in order to translate the emotional component as well as the cerebral component. I mean, it's nothing to separate in layers, it's all in one. And it's beautiful, and at the same time, because he's not documentedly famous and people didn't all record it and people didn't all write books about it and articles, and orchestras or concert organizers don't suggest to be playing it every semester, every season, thinking in university semester times, then it becomes the real meaning of being a musician, which is to convey what is meaningful to you and make it discover to others and convince them in a way pedagogically during the performance without to speak, just the music, the phrasing, the voicing, the modulation, the way they treat the sentence, the storytelling, the repetitivity, the devices that express them, the way of storytelling. It's so different from one to another in a subtle way. And of course, the listeners will tell you, oh, but this reminds me of. Fine, let them say that. But at some point, they will discover the importance of it. And when you know about what Mendelssohn did for Bach, if Bach could have been forgotten, what's left for the others? It's humility over humility there. And Mendelssohn, such selfless man, so beautifully so. Rachmaninoff playing Scriabin through Russia during 1915, the year of Scriabin's death, during war, and promoting his colleagues' music. I find that incredibly, well, selfless, to be honest. It's so competitive world. Everybody wants to be the one who is the first, the innovator, the this, the that. And in fact, it's better not to. Just be who you are. And I find that so moving when you hear this music of these people who express their soul, their career, not but their culture. The career becomes something of their lifetime. And of course, for pianists, it matters because that's the kind of music they knew that they reproduced by developing it. So you find Chopin, Rachmaninoff, you find Liszt in Scriabin, or you can. But that's not the whole point of it. The point is that you can find in each of them the expression of their culture, of their childhood, of their fears and hopes, of their excitements, of their intellect, of their literary knowledge of literature, as well as their knowledge of other arts or just curiosity about everything. You don't just play notes of people. You play the notes or translation of the condensed part of their personality. And you explore it so much. The Mediterranean this, the North European that, the sentence ending with the verb, with the express suspensions and syncopations, like in Schumann before the verb comes at the end of the sentence, the daydream music combined with the real life statement storytelling. And of course you have the borrowings, or apparently not, if they started to sound alike. And it's not about copyright, it's about probably commonwealth, after all. Or homage, no theft. I don't think so. I think when it's beautiful and meaningful, honest, earnest, You can always argue and say, I don't like it, I don't understand it, it's too complicated for me, I prefer tonal rather than serial. And some people find serial so beautiful, and I respect them so much for that. So difficult to connect these two elements together, but for those for whom that works like that is beautiful. And they can be inspirational to people and unlock locks of misunderstandings and saying, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that. Yeah, curiosity is so important. In fact, that it is. It takes your heart, and you wonder in G minor, what is this? I cannot get away from it. It's the addio of Mozart. Double quintet with violas. The transition to the recap of the 40th Symphony. G minor. You see, that's what I mean. It's the piece, not the composer. He happens to be Mozart. Quand même. Noblesse oblige. Speaking of non-noblesse, this is Saint-Saëns G minor concerto melodic line, which obviously he completely shaped upon the G minor ballade by Chopin number 1. And what you can say, Saint-Saëns, Mozart, Chopin, so what? We could think lesser master, greater master, super master, petit maître, grand maître, as they call them in France. I don't think so. I think it's the substract of their music. It just comes out and it becomes yours. It's like a gift they lift with us. That's because in the two piano concerto, Poulenc uses the look-alikeness with the slow movement of Mozart's D minor concerto. Mozart, you could think, okay, this is not getting anywhere now. How do you compare things like this? Or and you think Bach in its almost motoric best, so to say. And this is the opening of the first movement of Symphony of Sound by Igor Stravinsky. neoclassical, but this is more subtle than that. So then you would say, why compare Stravinsky and Bach, especially in the last movement of Symphony of Psalms, or even in the opening Kyrie of his Mass. This is the Mass in 4 parts by Bird, obviously not easily recognizable, sung by my voice. And you think Stravinsky's early neoclassical time periods music, sacred music, fits perfectly with William Byrd's Mass. So in a way, he was a chameleon, put it this way, stylistically. He could write a tango, and that was when Mademoiselle Boulanger had not yet started teaching tangos to Astor Piazzolla, her student. And this was a sort of spoof homage tango by Stravinsky, to say, I can write that too. Now, it's not important to understand if every composer leaves us something genuine, in the sense that we might like it because of its look-alikeness. So that's be it too. I mean, it's okay. That's why the great masters are not always the ones that leave us the most unforgettable things. Look at the Fauré, typical example of one of the great masters who remains understood, especially for his late works. And when you hear all these delayed voices compared to in his 45 years earlier for a second nocturne. There is a seductive dimension to his salon music, according to those who want to frame him into that. But it's so beautiful. And who's to care if it's Chopin or Rachmaninoff or Fauré? Of course, stylistically they are not, but when you do, the run-on sentence phrases of Rachmaninoff. I have so much to tell you. the end, I make a shortcut. He has the flat 7. And when Chopin writes a nocturne, I take it for what it is, not from whom it is. Of course, stylistically, I don't confuse, but I find such elevation in both. Chopin and Rachmaninoff in the run-on sentence and the melodic line. And when Chopin tries to write like Bach chromatic, the Etude in E flat minor, he also doesn't care about style. He writes what is the earnest of the moment for him. Chromatics and sort of a chorale melody. Very austere for his time. Especially with the sequence that comes, which is so baroque. Stabat Mater by Pergolesi. Of course, being Chopin, we don't care to say, oh, he wrote this style, oh, he wrote that style. He wrote the Krakowiak, the finale of his E minor concerto in major. But when he writes this, in E flat, you feel like you're in the chromaticisms of O Mensch beweint ein Sünde groß, Bach organ prelude chorale. There we go, back to Chopin. So the door between the two is so thin because they speak the same language: chromaticism, melodic lines, secondary voice, expression. Look at the sunshiny slow movement of the Mozart sonata written about his mother's death in Paris. And Beethoven's first sonata slow movement in the same key of F major with the same luminous feeling. Or while I was going to play to you the beginning of it, I was thinking of the slow movement of the Jupiter. So many things come in F major in mind. Such elegance in both cases of F major in Mozart and Beethoven's F major. Who's to say that Beethoven writes like Mozart? And Mozart? You can pass from the one to the other without quasi to be even disturbing the auditor. People listen to you, don't realize that you're going from one to the other one. Well, of course, if they know the piece. That's why I think it's so important to valorize the work and not to be so ultimate at the importance of the hierarchy of composers. The first piece of the last opus of Brahms. also in thirds, also in resonance of third pedal. Debussy's Moonshine, Moonlight. Moonshine. Cousinage, borrowing, serendipity. When you hear in Brahms's Rhapsody, when you hear, and then you hear Brahms's Concerto. They copy their own works. They requote themselves, let less the others. And why not? When you hear the first sonata by Beethoven, and then you hear the last movement of the 40th Symphony, everybody can play 6/4 arpeggio, and everybody can do this. And then similarly, all these borrowings, all these emotional connections, they have some kind of subliminal meaning, probably. And probably they're just hopefully only serendipity, or who knows. And so what, ultimately? It's not about copyright. It's about this kind of brotherhood of the colleagues. When you hear Bach opening, like, of the organ Fantasia in C minor, with the ascending sixth or the ascending fourth and the third voice. So the ascending sixth is so much the emotional expression of the hug of the fifth, which would be the appoggiatura, and you have what apparently is a very light music. By Chopin, so elegant, so of course it's not Bach's sixth, nor is Wagner's sixth. It becomes obsessive, leitmotivic, but still you have these things that you live as a musician. You play pieces, you hear pieces, you discover pieces, you forget pieces, you remember pieces through your life, and all of a sudden you think, wow, I didn't make the connection. Does not be even, but it's so tender to think, oh, perhaps when Beethoven writes the fugue of Opus 110, he thinks of Bach fugue. Well-tempered clavier. And so what if he didn't think of it? Or perhaps he did. And if he didn't, or he did, what difference does it make? I do. I connect the dots. I love both Beethoven's and Mozart's. I love the ascending sixth in Mozart. And in Chopin. Or in Bach. It doesn't mean they're all all alike. It doesn't mean they are equal. It just means that they bring us such an incredible enrichment in our soul. It's like reading this book and that volume of some biography, and then some different novel, or some kind of a historic science fiction, or perhaps something of a research about archaeology. Music is a bit of all that. You have a storytelling, you have archaeology, you have complete futuristic things, and sometimes in the same piece. And of course, the audacity of one time period is not the one after. So to enter in that is hard, because you have to empty one to fill up the other in order to be able to receive it. To receive it is the key word. In D minor quartet by Mozart, or Don Giovanni overture. And the scales. And then you think, oh my God, this is the concerto. D minor. And is the 104th Symphony by Haydn, not Brahms. The same D minor, dramatic, with the Neapolitan the second time. And the slow movement of the D major Beethoven sonata uses, but on the tonic, not on the 6/4. All of a sudden Schubert brings you and you go, oh my God, the world is beautiful, meaningful, thank you, what a gift of grace. And you think, if only Beethoven had heard Schubert, unlike the opposite, which was obvious, but it never happened in that way. And you think, the second movement of Opus 90 of Beethoven, what a kinship, unknowing. It's obviously in the air, in Vienna air, certainly. So perhaps we connect more the dots than, of course, they did. Or perhaps they did in ways that we didn't think of it. But it doesn't matter. Each of these beauties bring us so much soulful gift. It makes our day better, our life more meaningful. It makes us think, it makes us reflect, it makes us say like that. It's so easy to fake, but it's truly more meaningful when he's really smiling to you. And you feel like, oh, thank you. And when you hear the end of the Fantasy of Mozart in C minor, I'm sorry to say, and I want to shock anybody, but not dropping third C minor dramatic, even if it's emotionally withheld in Mozart and in Beethoven, is angrily repeated. Of course, German sixth. So we know that Beethoven, as a student, played the D minor concerto of Mozart, not the C minor one, but still the scales of his opening and the Mozart, the variation in the finale. Bach, contrasting in the variations of Mozart's last movement of the concerto, which Beethoven attended as a listener, and then he adopted even the coda. And this is I cannot share more, but I can all night long. How much the pieces are meaningful for what they are. And it's the same C minor. You think, okay, that's Beethoven and Mozart, they're giants. And then you hear the Mettner Sonata Tragica. I mean, excusez-moi. And this? Rachmaninoff second. So you can think, okay, this C minor, it calls for drama like 111. The Pathétique. Or the opening of the Mozart K. The Mass in C minor. And you think C minor, and then every C minor calls another C minor in your head of a musician having traveled for several decades through pieces. And they sort of respond to each other in your own soul, at least in mine, without hierarchy, just for the intensity, the beauty, the meaning, the expression. And I think it's important to mention, not to search to hierarchize, just take it for what it is, and it's so beautiful. It's a gift given to us to have forever, to treasure and to marvel and to transmit at its earnest.